streaming, but I now just started. Paul, you want to say something? Then David.
Yes, there is a growing concern in the newspapers and elsewhere about how Israel justifiably wants to destroy Hamas. What about the innocent Palestinians that haven't got enough water and enough food and can't get across the border to Egypt? What about that?
No one can get across the border into Egypt except for American citizens at this point. But wait, what's your question you're saying you're asking the question, what about these poor innocent civilians of Gaza?
Yes, who were not in control of their lives because Hamas was in charge.
Right.
But now, in an attempt to finally and completely destroy Hamas, which I agree with, what about those civilians?
Right. And wait, are you saying that, I'm just asking the question, are you saying that Israel has a responsibility to them?
Yes.
Is Israel's responsibility just because Israel has that we have a moral responsibility to protect people who are innocent?
Yes.
Does their own leadership have a responsibility to protect their innocent people?
Who is their leadership?
Hamas.
Well, no, then Hamas doesn't give a damn.
I know, but they elected Hamas.
Well, they regret that now.
I'm not so sure. I'm not so sure they do.
They're in the 20th year of a 4-year term, Hamas.
Right.
And by the way, this has nothing to do with the attack at the festival. This is about 190 plus hostages, men, old women, young children, teenagers, soldiers that were taken hostages. The siege is the response to that. How else are we supposed to get them out?
Well, I actually disagree with you. And the reason why, I mean, I agree with you, but I disagree with you both. And the reason why is I don't think that Israel has any plans on recovering the hostages.
But we got to try.
Well, we have to try. But I think I think they're going in to level Gaza.
Yeah.
And I think that
I'm talking about the siege now, though. No food, no energy.
You're right. They're hoping to try to see if they can get some movement, which they're not going to. But I'm just kind of aware that I'm just concerned that even though it's a value to redeem and save hostages, I think it's going to be way too complicated. These people are hidden in the most bizarrely ridiculous, strange places. Finding them is going to be.
But if your child was one of them,
of course, I'd want.
What would you be thinking?
Oh, for sure.
Do what you have to do to get them out.
I agree, but I also wonder if that's even remotely the calculus of the Israeli government right now. And I'm not blaming them because I'm thinking that they have a bigger, because they could be thinking to themselves, if we go in for the purposes of trying to get these hostages, who knows how many other people are going to die in the process. And I'm not.
But I heard that the Americans are sending in SEALs to get the American hostages.
Yeah.
But you think this? I'm just asking. Do you think that the SEALs are better than the Israel?
It's irrelevant if there's better, but the fact that the Americans are still saying there are American hostages,
right?
We can't, and who's going to know the difference between the American SEAL and an IDF or whatever
I'm hopeful. And I do believe that getting hostages matters, and I of course it does. No one's saying ignoring hostages literally from the start, but I'm just saying I don't know to what degree that Israel is going to hold back because they're going to think, oh, maybe there's a hostage here.
Or maybe they're dependent on the Americans because the Americans are not going to say that child is not an American.
You're probably right, but back to what I was saying though, Paul, to you is that I agree that Israel does have some responsibility to protect innocent lives. I believe that is what happened when they said 48 hours ago or longer, leave Gaza.
Right.
And I believe that's what they're doing when they put leaflets down and text messages telling people that they need to.
But they have no place to go.
Well,
Exactly.
again, why is that Israel's Like,
That's not necessarily Israel's problem.
why is that Israel's problem? You act as if Hamas hasn't had so much money coming into Gaza for the purposes of building these types of infrastructure places, which they have instead diverted to using for tunnels and missiles. And again, I'm not saying Israel doesn't have some measure of responsibility, but I do not think that it is even remotely fair to suggest that the foreign country is more obligated to the citizens than the leadership of its own place.
I'm about to ask one question of Paul.
And last thing, sorry, yes, you can one. And last thing, it's like Hamas wants the citizens to stay in Gaza because then it makes the whole mission harder for them and more shields. And so it's like
Right.
they infuriate me for making us do worse. We don't. Was it Golda Meir who said, you know, it was one thing to suffer with the. I'm not getting the quote right, but I'm going to get the message right. It's one thing to give us the pain of watching our own children die. It's another thing to give me the pain of being forced to have to kill other innocent people for no, you know, because I had no choice.
Can I ask one question of Paul and people like Paul? What would you do? What's your strategy? What's your solution, Paul, to this? You can't just throw your hands up, start pointing fingers, and say, Israel's wrong here, Israel's wrong there. What would you have us do? Or have them do? Turn the page and say, well, bad luck this time, life goes on?
I don't know.
Right, no one knows.
Well, okay.
But I think Paul's just
But
saying.
you have a responsibility to know if you're gonna say what they're doing is wrong.
But Paul has admittedly said, he's correctly said that he wants to see Hamas completely eradicated. He just said that he feels a responsibility to the innocent civilians who are there too. Is that correct?
Yes.
Right, which I agree with, and what I think Arthur agrees with too, except Arthur is, if you don't mind me clarifying everything, I think Arthur is saying that, which I agree with also, which is, yeah, I feel terrible about I hope Arthur's saying he feels terrible for innocent civilians, but what he is saying also is, but I don't know what the other solution is. Like, I wish there was a better solution to
I
this.
also feel terrible for the hostages.
Yeah, I feel terrible
And for the more than 1,000 people, 1,300 people who were killed randomly.
Well,
I feel terrible for everybody, and I wish there would, but I'm not exactly sure what the alternative is at this point.
way to
And then I think, Bob,
about
you
it
want to say something too, but let
is
Tom.
to liken it, say, to World War II. Nazis
Dresden.
made up maybe 20% of the German population, but the Germans overall really supported the Nazi government, just as I think, I might be wrong about, but I think the Gazans gave great popular support to Hamas.
They do.
There were some that didn't like it, of course, there's some Germans that didn't like Nazis, but overall it was great popular support. But when the Allies were bombing Germany, they didn't say, this is where the Nazis are, this is where
Right, we just
the
leveled
non-Nazi
Dresden.
Germans are.
We leveled Dresden.
And so many other places.
And while we're at it, we leveled Afghanistan too after 9/11. And if you don't think, and by the way, just in case you're trying to do the math, 9/11, right, had 3,300 deaths.
That was just in the Trade Center. There were others in the Pentagon.
Oh.
What about the police and the firemen that passed away?
Well, I think that's included in the
Since
number.
then. No, since then.
No,
You mean since then?
yeah, I mean, since.
All right, so what number do you want to use?
Whatever it is, it's
Let's
tiny.
Let's say,
45.
fine, let's say 5,000 just to simplify this. 5,000 in a country of 450 million.
300.
No,
350?
350.
All right, 5,000 and 350
400,000.
million as opposed to 1,500 in a country of 8 million.
It's 200,000, that's what it's equal to.
Right.
The
The US didn't worry about how many innocent civilians got killed in Nagasaki and Hiroshima either.
Or Afghanistan.
That's true.
Or Afghanistan. And again, so it's like, so certainly in America, like America needs to be careful with how it speaks about, you know, response and
Absolutely.
and civilians but But putting that aside, the rest of the world is going to criticize Israel, but that's all because of it. That's anti-Semitic criticism. Like, generally speaking, when there's criticism of Israel, it's not even a thick smoke screen. It is a thin smoke screen for anti-Semitism. And again, that's not to say that Israel is always right and perfect. I don't believe it. I do, however, believe that generally speaking, and I would argue most of the time, if not almost all of the time, there is a relatively good argument for why Israel is doing what it's doing, even if we may disagree with it. Meaning, they might close down, or they might shut off this town in the West Bank, or go in and do a, and do a mission in Jenin or something like that. And we might say, did you really need to do that? Or was this not kind of the urging of one of these insane people in the government right now that kind of created such an incursion into, let's say, Jenin? And we might be able to say that, but Israel could make a very good argument for why it did it. But we could just say, okay, good argument, but there's also another side to this story. In other words, like in every case, when we say, oh, was it a problem? It's not like it was on there's more evidence than weapons of mass destruction in Iraq. There's more of a smoking gun generally in the various different incursions that happen than merely that. And so I feel, sometimes I'm disappointed in what Israel chooses to do, but I get it. There's just political things literally between Jews and Jews, that's when I feel more confident complaining. When it has to do with and you want me to give you another complaint? Sure. My other complaint has to do with the fact that I wish that Netanyahu would have been more open over the last number of years to having conversations about two states, which he has stopped. And that doesn't mean that led to this. I can't tell you anything that specifically led to this, with the exception maybe of the whole Saudi Arabia-Israel normalization but I don't believe any of, I don't know.
Protesting in the streets did not help.
What's that?
Protesting in the streets.
True.
A divided Israel was seen as a
True.
potential target.
True. But what I guess what I'm just trying to say is that, I forgot what I was going to say. Wait, it was a good point. All right.
While you're thinking,
Netanyahu,
while you're thinking, for me, the more frightening part of this is the spillover, where we now have a gate in front of our synagogue, where
we've had a gate, but now we have it locked.
yes.
That won't happen forever. I think
Yeah.
we're talking about for the next week, yeah.
The mayor of New York got up and was talking about the concern he had for the Jewish population in New York.
Yeah.
So this is not just Israel.
So why don't we,
This is affecting us.
yeah, I agree.
personally.
So Dave, Bob, Paul, Greg, and Dave, Bob, Paul, Greg, and that's it. So, and then we'll be done, okay? So let's start with Dave, Bob, Paul, Greg. Good, Dave.
I heard some encouraging news just before we left to come over here, that the Lebanese army attacked Hezbollah rocket positions.
Great.
And they don't want Israel to bomb the hell out of Lebanon, so
Or they don't want America to.
So that was good news, but I don't see how the Israelis could ever support a two-state solution and have something on the West Bank, which would be another Gaza, and then Israel would be totally surrounded with terrorists.
Well,
their charter is they want all of Israel for themselves. That's part of their charter.
That's Hamas's charter. And I understand that Hamas has support in the West Bank, but I do believe that is not that the Hamas kind of power grab is not in the West Bank the same way it is in Gaza.
Yeah.
But I worry about it, but I still think that if you had a crystal ball and looked 30 years in the future, it has to be two states. It just has to be. So just do it already.
So close in 91.
I know, we're so close and you're right, Oslo, it's so close.
But they've got to demilitarize. They've got to agree not to be a militarized state.
Who's gonna sponsor the second state? You know, it comes down to, how is the people gonna have their own electricity, water, sewage, banking? Those are the main, and then,
They have an infrastructure that Israel's helped put them in place, that America's helped put them in place. The West Bank has it. It's Gaza should have had it, but they have been wasting their money on other things.
They're stealing, whoever it was Arafat, he stole
Yes, still tons, hundreds of millions of dollars.
billions.
Hundreds of billions?
Yeah.
Wow. I mean, no, Arafat had a fat bank account in Paris. There's no question about it. But
Yes, couple of points. First to Paul, and I agree with you. I also have sympathy for innocent civilians, wherever they are. One key point is that the Rafah crossing, has been closed not only on the Egyptian side, but also on the Gazan side.
right,
Hamas will not it's not just letting people out, they won't let aid in. And there's probably a whole bunch of organizations that are willing and able to bring aid into Gaza to innocent civilians, but can't get it in.
right.
Okay?
Drop it by air?
Yeah, but
Actually, I heard that
Who's
they
gonna
were
get
opening
the
up a border.
also?
that's the Rafah crossing.
Right,
And that they're opening it up to, the hope was they're opening it up to Americans
To leave.
to leave, and also
Bring
they were
aid
gonna
in.
slowly, they were gonna do, was it 1,000 people a day or something like that, which is nothing. But I mean,
No aid.
but
They
there's,
know they were gonna let aid in, is what I heard this morning.
They
I know,
did
but
not
the
say
day is
that.
only
We have
gone
next,
and they haven't done it.
but again, I think the interesting thing is what both of you are bringing up is the fact that, and this is interesting, that Israel's always the one who is criticized for blocking, we're the siege and we're blocking this and that coming in, and we've closed our borders, so they can't come out. But there's a perfectly good border on the southern side, which no one seems to talk about. It's only just Israel is the problem.
Right, and then and also, again, what you've been saying, Rabbi, Hamas, instead of spending money
Yeah.
on infrastructure,
Right.
has been spending it on
Yeah.
weapons
Tunnels.
to use against Israel, and building tunnels, which make it almost impossible for the IDF or any other agency, the SEALs, to rescue hostages or fight Hamas. They have hundreds of miles of tunnels
Yeah.
that go under, they go down under
100
buildings,
It could be 100 feet to 200 feet.
down
Deep.
Yeah.
deep.
They got
And then
cities
hundreds of miles
underground, they can
across.
drive trucks.
And you
Underground.
cannot,
I don't know.
four
that
people
happens.
could defend a tunnel against hundreds of
Right,
attackers.
You can't attack it that way.
No, you can't.
right. No, you can only seal the tunnels, but you can't go
Yeah,
into the
You can seal
tunnels.
them, but
The-
that's making the whole situation
Yeah.
exponentially more difficult.
Paul, you want to say something? And then Greg is the last, and then we're gonna call it.
At my age, I sometimes tend to be a little forgetful.
Yeah.
So I forgot.
Bravo.
Next time whisper to me.
Bravo.
I'll-
Greg, you get double if you want, because Paul forgot what he was gonna say.
No, I won't take double. First, I want to thank the rabbi and the other participants for putting the program together last evening. Thought it was good. I thought it was community-based. Despite all the issues that are open, like we've been talking about here, and there's not many answers to, no easy answers. I thought it was functional for what I think you intended. So I wanted to thank you for that. And the point I wanted to raise, when I was driving over last evening, I was listening to a general commentator, American general, fully supportive of Israel's right to retaliate and defend itself. But he made a point that made me think, and that was and it was his expectations, this is some of what's going on in the background in diplomatic discussions. Hamas and its proxy, Iran, did not do what they did without expecting that Israel was going to have a massive reaction and probably invade. So with that being said, probably part of their planning was to establish decoys and traps and all kinds of other situations to take advantage of it. So he was just saying from a military perspective, you have to go in assuming that a big part of the plan has been to goad Israel into doing exactly what it's going to do. And I hadn't really thought that through, but it certainly raises an important point.
Well, I agree with you, but I would also say that I think that Iran, who I agree with you is the mastermind behind all this, I believe that Iran doesn't care about what happens to Hamas. Hamas is just like, it's just like a little freebie that they have down there doing a lot of their dirty work. So even though I do agree that they knew that Israel will retaliate, and that they are probably preparing a fair number of ambush type of things that this general spoke about, I also think that Iran just said, let's strike while the iron is hot, that Israel's about to normalize relations with Saudi Arabia. This is bad for us. Let's put Saudi Arabia in a bad position, and let's force them to kind of take sides and therefore break off relations with Israel. And that's what Iran wanted, and that's ultimately the success story of all this, and for them. And and I wonder, although I do agree that they're prepared for the Israeli retaliation, I don't think that it was like, part of this master mischievous plan by Hamas to have Israel invade. I think that it's that they just knew it was going to happen, that they know it's going to happen. So in other words, I hope that it's not as walking into a minefield as this general says, because that would obviously be terrible. But I'm not so sure Hamas is so sophisticated to know that.
I remember what I was going to say.
Yeah, but you gotta understand something. The way they attacked, it was a sophisticated.
Yeah, it was a sophisticated plan.
And also, Israel set up a high tech. They didn't expect anything like this, with people, Hamas flying in and destroying that part of that.
I think they did. I just don't think they expected it to this degree. I think that you can't not have intel on this stuff. I just think that they thought it was going to be yet another thing that we could another storm that we could weather. Paul, what'd you forget?
The German people believed that Hitler was sent to them by God. And the Muslims also believe in Allah, and that especially in the north, the party of God, Hezbollah, that's what Hezbollah means. The Muslim believes God is on their side. And when you have a situation like that, it's just about nothing you can do.
Yeah, who's
except
God?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
I'll tell you what, we're going to get to our text in a second. I would like to just have us not answer, but think about, like, what's the long plan? What's the plan here? Like, I wish I knew. Let's assume that Israel is successful in what it does in the next month, and they go in and they pretty much level Gaza and destroy this military, kind of this terrorism infrastructure that they've created, and they really, really just cut the legs off of Hamas, which is my hope. Then what? Like, I just don't.
YOLO in the Arab world, the Saudis, the Jordanians,
What, they should take all the.
They have to step in at that point.
but we know they won't.
Figure out some kind of a government.
We know they won't,
I
but,
haven't done it yet.
yeah, we know they won't,
They
but.
won't even take one refugee.
All right, let's so let's get back to tech. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kitshanu mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah. Praise you, Adonai our God, for commanding us to study Torah and bring us back together again in a year of study, peace, wholeness, fear.
Can't say it.
Good.
I know that we ended,
Anyway, amen.
I amend myself, but fair enough. I know
We
where we,
ended at the end of 44.
but I know, well, wait, no, we ended, wait, oh yeah, right. We ended at the end of 44, but I thought we would go back halfway through 44, just so, kind of like, just to freshen, to prime the engine a little bit, to lubricate our weak engines here. By the way, just, you know what, can't hurt. Let's just, a quick roll around the room to introduce ourselves, and then we'll get started. So Paul, you go first.
I am Paul Pinchas Schatzberg.
And you are Bob Sikora.
Socorro, yes.
Steven, you want to introduce yourself?
I'm Steve Schwartz.
All right.
Karen Cook.
Sherry.
Sherry Argue.
Mary Kim.
Tom D. Kornfeld.
Rochelle Hollinger.
Arthur Phillips.
Barbara Wingrove.
Dave Fox.
Cindy Fox.
Ari Goldstein, and on the screen, top corner, Greg, you get to go first.
Greg Walker.
Nice. And Steven's wife to the right-hand corner.
Sharon Schwartz.
Very nice. And all the way from Colorado, we are speaking to Ellen Pendorf. David looks like from the Whitewaters of Shenandoah.
Easton.
David Bowman. It's great call.
That's right. And John, where are you calling from? Tyler, Texas these days?
Nope.
Oh, you're on mute.
Was muted.
You're muted. No big deal.
Okay.
But Laura Murray, where are you calling from?
I'm calling from home because I have an appointment. So
Like
I
first
was
time.
expecting to go.
John, you're unmuted now.
Thank you. I'm unmuted. Good morning, and John Thorne. Great to be back with you.
Great to be back with you too. Freya,
Hi, Freya Sutton. I'm here in Bowie.
nice to see your name. And I bet you that's Eleanor.
Yes, Eleanor Feldman and Steve Kahn.
Well, according to us, that's Sariv Khan.
Yeah.
Just saying. There's no proof that it's Steve. All we know of is Sariv. Take a look.
Rabbi, you were saying something before. You said the first time, Laura, and then somebody jumped in.
Oh, I said first time, long time. That's when that's what you say when you call in on a radio show, but it's the first, but you've been listening, but first time, long time, like that's
Long
whatever.
time listener.
Long time listener, first time
Right.
caller. All right, so we're gonna pick up with on page 96, which is Genesis chapter 44, verse 18. This is where the Torah portion Vayigash begins. I thought it was a good place to start. So where we left off last Jewish year, was that Joseph, he was the favorite son. He got thrown into a pit. He got sold into slavery. He went down into slavery. He grew in Potiphar's house. He became he oversaw everything in Potiphar's house, and then he was accused of making sexual advances on Potiphar's wife, wrongfully, but accused nonetheless. He then proceeded to go to jail. While he was in jail, he met up with a couple of Pharaoh's workers. He interpreted their dreams successfely and was known as a dream interpreter. So when Pharaoh had these mysterious dreams himself, Pharaoh said, "Who shall I find who can interpret my dreams for me. And the butler says, hey, I know somebody. It's this dude, Joseph, who is in jail. So Pharaoh calls for Joseph. Joseph interprets Pharaoh's dreams correctly, because Pharaoh's dream was 7 years of good fertile soil, followed by 7 years of famine. That was the interpretation, rather. And Joseph said, let me help you through this. And he proceeds to conserve and save and store grain during the 7 years of plenty, such that when the 7 years of famine came, that Egypt was in a perfectly good position within the area to weather that storm. However, the rest of the area, the people around Egypt had not been so fortunate. People in Israel, in Jacob and his family in Israel, just one of the many people who were suffering. And so Jacob sends his sons down to get grain from Egypt. He sends all of his sons except one, that one being Benjamin. And the reason why he doesn't send Benjamin is because Benjamin has become his new replacement favorite son. And so all the brothers, they go to Egypt. They meet up with Joseph. They don't realize it's Joseph, but Joseph recognizes them. For Joseph, the story and the memory of them throwing him in a pit is still alive, as it should be. They go to get grain. Joseph basically says, yes, you can, I'm giving you grain back. However, I want you to return back here with your brother Benjamin, who they didn't bring the first time because Jacob didn't want Benjamin to go with them, because Jacob was afraid that Benjamin was going to get killed while he was there. And so, but the famine is so strong, they bring Benjamin back with them. Jacob agrees to let Benjamin go. They go before Joseph, this time with Benjamin, so the brothers a second time. They go before Joseph and they say, we're back, we need grain. And Joseph continues to be coy and but kind. He doesn't let on his who he is. His identity is still kept a secret. And at the very end, well, excuse me, as the brothers are leaving with their grain, Joseph has a silver goblet placed into Benjamin's sack as a way of setting him up and framing him for theft. And then he goes and chases them down. He sends one of his officers, and they go through all they say, one of you is a thief, and they go through all the bags. And in Benjamin's bag, what do you know, is this goblet. And it's just heartbreaking because, because it didn't happen, but also because of all the people, Benjamin of all people, we know that his brothers realize that now Benjamin is the apple of Jacob's eye, and that they're putting themselves in a really tough bind here. And so that's kind of where we are. And so verse 18 of chapter 44 says, then Judah went up to him, that is to say Joseph, and said, please, my lord, let your servant appeal to my lord, and do not be impatient with your servant, you who are equal of Pharaoh, right? So Judah is now obviously getting very polite in his language. That's not to say he wasn't polite before, but he's now saying, I need to have a moment of time. Please give me a chance to explain to you. And he's saying this to Joseph, again, not knowing it's Joseph. Joseph knowing, of course, that it is his brother Judah speaking. And oh, by the way, just as one more thing I forgot to mention, but it's important, and that is this whole plan of Joseph's to put the goblet in Benjamin's bag is all an intense and elaborate setup, all for Joseph to find out if, in fact, his brothers have changed. And that is what this story is about. Forgiveness, change, atonement. Are you different than you were before? Because last time you were put into a position in which you had a brother rather, that you knew was the favorite brother. Last time you decided to turn your back on me, throw me into a pit and get rid of all your troubles by selling me into slavery. But a new favorite emerged, and once again, we have a metaphoric opportunity for you just to sell that miserable favorite child into slavery, and let's see what happens. And so, verse 19 continues. My Lord asked his servants, this is Judah still talking, have you a father or another brother? We told my Lord, we have an old father, and there is a child of his old age, the youngest. His full brother is dead. That's Joseph. He is saying to Joseph that Joseph is dead. Does that make sense? But also important is the fact is that he says his full brother, because that is also true, that Benjamin is a 100% biological brother of Joseph. All of the other brothers have different mothers. Well, there are 4 total mothers, of which, in the case of Joseph and Benjamin, those are the only 2 who share the same mother. So it's not a different mother for every single one of the brothers, but it is various different mothers. But for Joseph and Benjamin, they are the 2. And as we've talked before, they are the 2 children of Rachel, who was Jacob's favorite. So it continues. There is a child of his old age, the youngest. His full brother is dead, so that he alone is left of his mother, and his father dotes on him. Then you said to your servants, so this is kind of Judah, by the way, kind of recapping. It's kind of very, first you told me you wanted me to, then you told me this, then I said this. It's like Judah going over the details of the case just to make sure that they agree so they can kind of are communicating the same message, right? That happens a lot in our world, right? When you're having a conversation with someone and you feel as if you need to just can we just go over what happened here? Because you know what I'm talking about? Because it's like, it feels as if you think I did something wrong, but can we just I was I was nowhere near this when all this happened. You're blaming me for leaving the refrigerator open, but I haven't been outside. Now I'm getting kind of personal. So that he alone is left to his mother, and his father does on him. Then you said to your servants, bring him down to me that I may set eyes on him. And that, by the way, is the Hebrew va'asima einei alav. That is set eyes on him. Could mean literally, let me just take a look at him. But that is also a euphemism for, not a euphemism, but an expression for show favoritism. Then you said, bring him down so that I can kind of dote on him too, show favoritism too. But I think it's more likely just to be the plain meaning. Just let me bring him down so I can take a look at him. We said to my Lord, the boy cannot leave his father. If he were to leave him, his father would die. Now the Hebrew, right? The Hebrew says, so you have to, okay, so if you see the number, we're in verse 22 of the Hebrew, okay? And if you look at verse 20, it's the last word of the verse. So it's just across from that I might set eyes on. And if you look over, the Hebrew word is vamit, okay? Now,
it means die?
Yes, but what we really should do is look at the beginning of it and translate it from the beginning. So going to verse 22 in the Hebrew, Vanomer el Adoni lo yuchal hana'ar la'azov et aviv. So then you said, excuse me, then we said, to you, to you, Adoni, my Lord, not God, but Joseph, Lord, Lo yuchal hana'ar la'azov et aviv, the boy is not able to leave his father, ve'azav, and if he were to leave et aviv, his father, and then it says vamet, then he would die. So the point, though, is it suggests, the English suggests his father would die, but it's not so clear who would be doing the dying, right? Because because obviously the English is trying to communicate that that his father would die of sadness, right? That's how you kind of experience that. But you certainly could say, if I said to you, no, that was intended to be Benjamin dying.
But it says et aviv, which is the father, right?
But if he were to
So
leave
that's the
his
most-
father, no, et aviv means his father,
Right.
but that's not,
I would take it to mean that the Amir is referring to the father because it's the closest noun.
no, I think it's referring to the word prior, azav et aviv, if he were to leave his father, vamit. Are you following? It's like, so it's, point is that I think the Hebrew is, you could, look, I'm not saying that it's not the father dying, Jacob dying, but I'm just saying that I'm not so clear that that's the case. And I believe that it could be referring to Benjamin dying. Like, in other words, my father said, I don't want him going because if he were to go, like, this guy's, he's as good as dead, either because he can't handle the journey or because he's going to be a target. Or because he's afraid, like my father thought, that he can't be trusted in our hands. Like the last time. But then there could be a third person who dies. It could be Judah, he's referring to himself. Why? Because we know that Judah made a deal with Jacob to send Benjamin. And the deal that Judah said was, if I don't bring him back, I'll be responsible for him. It's on me. And so what he's saying is that he can't leave his father, because if he leaves his father, then I'm the one who's going to die.
So what does Sepharia say?
Well, Sepharia is just going to give a translation, but then the question would be, what do the commentaries say?
Mm-hmm.
I could take a second to look. Can't hurt.
That's what I meant.
Sepharia.
Something like that, yeah. We're all about ambiguity of language here, right?
Or not knowing
Yeah,
enough.
Which, and my wondering is whether the ambiguity was purposeful.
Sometimes it is. So it's 44:22, right? 44. If he'd leave his father would die. And that's the translation, but we knew that would be the translation. And so one commentary, let's Rashi have to say. If he should leave his father, he would die. If he leaves his father, we shall be in anxiety lest he die on the journey, because indeed his mother died during a journey.
Oh.
And Rashi's translation is, for if he should leave his father, he would die. So again,
You don't know.
Rashi's suggesting that it's Benjamin who dies. So again, and I could make an argument that it's Judah who dies. The point is that it's not crystal clear that it's father he's talking about. Now it continues, but you said to your servants, unless your youngest brother comes down with you, do not let me see your faces. When we came back to your servant, my father, and when we came back to your servant, my father, in other words, so now it's like all my servants, it's like hard, but now they're saying when we went back to Jacob, who is also in respectful language to this person standing in front of me, who we don't know is Joseph, your servant. So when we came back to your servant, my father, we reported my lord's words to him. Later, our father said, go back and procure some food for us. We answered, we can't go down only if our younger brother is with us. Can we go down? For we may not show our faces to the man unless our youngest brother is with us. Your servant, my father, said to us, as you know, my wife bore me 2 sons. But one is gone from me, and I said, alas, he was torn by a beast, and I have not seen him since. Okay, so, and the reason why I've been just kind of doing this faster is because we did this all last year, but I did want to kind of go back and just refresh us. There's a sense of acceptance on Judah's part here. As you know, my wife, this is Judah reporting what Jacob said. As you know, my wife bore me 2 sons, right? So from Judah's perspective, there's more than one wife. But Judah's reporting Jacob's word, my wife bore me 2 sons, almost as like a resignation and acceptance of, all right, lest I think that, that my mom, Leah, was equal in the favoritism. It's not the case. It's just Rachel. But one is gone from me, and I said, alas, he was torn by a beast, and I have not seen him since. If you take this one from me too, and he meets with disaster, you will send my white head down to Sheol in sorrow. So, and that's the closest we have to hell.
So that also explains why the last word in 22 refers to Benjamin.
Right.
So that whole passage.
Right. It's like,
explain that.
Right. It's like you're gonna. It could be Jacob. It's like that. It's going to cause him so much anguish that he'll die, but it really could be his fear of losing Benjamin. Like Benjamin's never going to be make it.
Yeah, that's why Rashi said that.
Yep. Now, if I come to your servant, my father, and the boy is not with us, since his own life is so bound up with his, and I love this expression. I think I said this last year. I'll tell you again. Like the Hebrew is beautiful. It says nafsho kashura b'nafsho. Like nafsho is like nefesh. Nefesh is a soul. Nafsho, his soul. Kashura, like kind of like the word from the word kosher, but it means kashur means bound up, tied up together. B'nafsho, his soul is bound up with his soul. It's a beautiful. It's just like a lovely expression about people who's really have a type, like I love to use that expression when I think about people who have a nice relationship with each other.
Last May, you pointed out that when he said he was torn by a beast and I have not seen him since, he's sort of hedging that he's not dead.
Right. It's possible. Right. I do think, clinging to hope at least.
Or no, he knows that he was sent off alive.
Right. Jacob said, and it's like Judah who's changing the words a little bit, because, and I said, alas, he was torn by wit and I haven't seen him since. In other words, what he's trying to say is, oh, maybe you never know. And so I don't want to I want to leave open the possibilities, or I don't know. There's various different ways of thinking about that. But now it's, when he sees that the boy is not with us, he will die, and your servants will send the white head of your servant, our father, down to Sheol in grief. So that's now why it's referring to, of course, him, Jacob, being the one who dies. But now your servant has pledged himself for the boy to my father. So now your servant, so now this is Judah saying to Joseph, again, not knowing it's Joseph, referring to himself as your servant. Now your servant has pledged himself for the boy to my father. He's still reporting to Joseph what happened. So in other words, I promised that I would be the one to guarantee his safety. If I do not bring him back to you, I shall stand guilty before my father forever. So this certainly explains why it is that Judah has inserted himself as spokesman of the people of his brothers. He's not the oldest. Remember, Reuben is the oldest. Then Shimon and Levi are the next two. But Judah has kind of taken on the mantle of spokesperson for the brothers. Therefore, please let your servant remain as a slave to my lord instead of the boy, and let the boy go back with his brothers. For how can I go back to my father unless the boy is with me? Let me not be witness to the woe that would overtake my father. So, Judah seems to care most about the woe of his father and not necessarily about what is right and wrong. However, Judah has clearly shown in that moment that the brothers, or at least Judah, the leader of the brothers, has changed, and that he's not going to watch as Benjamin goes into a pit, metaphorically. Instead, he is going to try to do something about it and change what happened the first time around. And ultimately, that is what, when you think about it, like that, when it comes to legitimate apologies and real atonement and apologies, that's the best one. When confronted with the exact same situation a second time and doing it differently, right? Like, oh, you spoke badly about me. You didn't defend me. Oh, I'm sorry. Okay, I accept your apology, but that doesn't mean I really feel as if you're a changed human being. The way you see is if you have another chance, whether that person is going to speak badly about you, defend you, whatever it is, and does the right way of behavior the second time around. And so that's the real way to feel good about apologies and about atonement, is when you feel confident that they're a changed human being. And so that's what Joseph's doing, is just really setting it up so he can see for sure.
Do you think Judah had some idea, an inkling of who Joseph was? Because he's not saying we threw him in a pit and we sent him off to, with the Mennonites, whoever was going out, by the way. He's saying he was torn by a beast and I haven't seen him since. So he's sort of saying.
But that's the story he told Jacob.
Yeah.
The story he told Jacob is Joseph was torn up by.
But he's saying this to the foreigner, to Joseph as well.
Correct. Now, but the question is that who's speaking in verse 28? I mean, we know Judah's speaking, but excuse me, I'm so sorry about the yawn. Is he reporting Jacob's words, or is he saying his own words? So in verse 28,
he's sort of coloring it, and he's not.
But one is gone from me, and so it says, but one is gone from me. So that is Jacob speaking. One of my two favorite children is gone from me.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, so is he still reporting Jacob? Or I think Judah is saying, and I said to my father at that moment, he was torn by a beast and I have not seen him since. But I'm not so sure but that could be, but remember, but that was indeed Jacob's own words, was he must have been torn by a wild beast. So are you following what I'm saying? So in the actual event that happened in chapter 37, the brothers came back with a jacket that was bloody.
Mm-hmm.
And they said, here is this jacket, inspect it. Is it Joseph's jacket? And Jacob says, it's Joseph's coat. He must have been torn apart by a wild beast, right? So now the next time we're hearing that line is now. And now the question is, who's speaking those words? Because it's Jacob saying, but one is gone from me. And then in the second half of that sentence, and I said, alas, he was torn by a beast. So again, do we know that is Judah reporting Jacob's words, or is that Judah saying they're his own words? I don't know.
It's Judah, he could be coloring it.
Yeah, could be.
He could say, I don't want to tell this Pharaoh guy that.
What the truth
that
is.
the 12 of us, or the 11 of us left were
That's right.
so vicious that we threw
Yeah,
our brother away.
yeah. Because that will certainly not paint us in the best picture in
You
general
think?
as human beings, right? No, I mean, unfortunately, the text is unclear, and the Hebrew does not clarify it.
On purpose, I think.
Yep. So chapter 45 begins with really one of the great, at least Hebrew lines, another great Hebrew line from this. I know it by heart. V'lo yachol Yosef lihitapek. And Joseph was unable to control himself. It's like he lost all control. And l'chol hanitzavim alav, he wasn't able to control himself in front of all of his attendants. And he cried out, "Have everyone withdraw from me." So it's kind of like, you're a person who's crying so much, he's like, just get away, I need some time to myself, right? But it's not clear that that's why it's because he's getting all emotional, that's why he wants all these people gone, but it could be more than that. So he says, again, he's not able to control himself, and he says, everyone withdraw from me, have everyone withdraw from me. So there was no one else about when Joseph made himself known to his brothers. So why do you think he wanted everyone to leave? I believe I have a couple of thoughts in my mind, one of which is the obvious I already mentioned, but I have another thought too. But why do you think, is there any other reasons what you can think of why Joseph would want these Egyptians to leave?
Because he knew
They
what
didn't
happened.
want to be telling them that he was really Jewish.
He doesn't want the Egyptians to know that they're his brothers.
Doesn't want the Egyptians to know they're his brothers.
This is the first.
Doesn't want the Egyptians to know that he's a Jew.
This is the first time that Joseph is hearing why his father didn't come after him.
That's a great point. He just found out about the beast and that he thought they were dead. He was dead.
Right.
The jacket.
And
Right.
and why didn't, as a child,
Come after-
why didn't my parents come look for me?
Right. After all, I heard the stories about how Abraham went and chased after Lot, his son-in-law, from all those, from the kings when he was taken as a hostage. Why?
I thought I wasn't loved.
Yeah, that's interesting. Sure. For sure. That's probably very helpful. Now I understand. He thought I was dead.
Yeah.
Any other reasons why he wants the Egyptians to leave? It's possible, I was thinking that maybe he was concerned that if the Egyptians find out, that he was Jewish, or about what the brothers did to him, that the Egyptians might, retaliate against them, because it's like, here's our vice president right here who has been, who was thrown into a pit and sold to slavery by these people. They're bad people, and we should do something about it. And Joseph may not have, who knows if he's concerned he may not have been able to stop it. I'm not sure. So it says, verse 2, his sobs were so loud that the Egyptians could hear. And so the news reached Pharaoh's palace. Right? In other words, by the way, the Hebrew is even more interesting, because it says, Vayiten et kolo bivchi, and so his voice was lifted so much in sobs. Vayishma'u Mitzrayim, and all of Egypt heard it, and even the house of Pharaoh heard it. In other words, it's like, it suggests that it's like that, the sobs were so loud that word got around and that the rumors spread. But what the text is actually trying to say was the sobs were actually loud enough that it was like broadcast, like on a speaker. Joseph said to his brothers, I am Joseph. is my father still well? By the way, you want to see, I'll read this Hebrew to you and tell me if it reminds you of anything. Vayomer Yosef el Echav, and Joseph spoke to his brothers. Ani Yosef, I am Joseph. Ha'od Avichai, is my father still alive? So Ha'od Avichai, does that remind you of anything? Yes. What's the second line? Od Avinu Chai, Od Avinu Chai, Od Avinu, Od Avinu, Od Avinu Chai. Very good, Rochelle. Like, you following what we're talking about? So it's like, that's the Hebrew. It's Ha'od Avichai, Od Avinu Chai. It's the same. That's where the song took its words from. It says, is my father still well? V'lo yachlu echav la'onot oto, but his brothers weren't able to answer him. Ki niv halu mipanav, because they were just so dumbfounded before him. Like, they're just like, you can picture it. It's a jaw drop right there. Wait. Joseph? That's, right? Yeah, go ahead.
It seems weird, though, that Joseph is asking if his father's still alive when Judah has just been talking about they can't do X, Y, and Z because it will kill his father. So.
Yeah, but he asked, is his father still well?
Well, it says Chai, living. But.
Yeah, well, I could understand, but living seems like a bizarre thing given all the discussion that's just going on.
So I will answer that question fully by reading the next verse. Okay? And the answer is going to you're going to be like, yeah, or it could disappoint you, but it'll probably be, for most people here, yeah, of course. Okay? What's verse 5? So remember, that was just verse 4. Verse 3. That was verse 3. I'm Joseph, is my father still well, but his brothers couldn't answer him, so dumbfounded were they on account of him. Verse 4, one verse later, we're not even talking about 10 verses, we're one verse later. Then Joseph said to his brothers, come forward to me. And when they came forward, he said, I'm your brother Joseph, he whom you sold into Egypt. Right? So what do you gather from, for those of you who've been studying with me for a long time here, and even for those of you who've been studying with me for a short time, what do you make of verse 3 and then followed by verse 4? They are saying, well, let's put it this way. In verse 3, he says, I'm Joseph, is my father still well? And everyone's like, huh? And then what does he do? He says, verse 4, come closer, I got a secret to tell you. I'm Joseph, your brother. And what you really want the next verse to be is, and then the brother said, yeah, you told us in verse 3. We know we didn't need to come closer. You just told us one verse earlier. Right? But that's not what happens. Instead, they're like, oh, you're Joseph. Which leads you to think.
They knew it all along.
Knew it all along, or?
They didn't believe him.
Didn't believe him, or?
They're trying desperately to figure out what comes next.
True, but I'm still trying to answer the question about, hello, Avichai, is my father still alive? And they just told him.
Documentary hypothesis.
Documentary hypothesis. Thank you, David. Yes. 2 authors.
That's I just was going to say that. Thank you, David.
2 authors. There was the one author who said, I'm Joseph, is my father still well? Because that author did not have that whole text before in which they repeated everything that had happened with my living father. But rather, it was only the second one that follows that first story, which, then they tell that whole story about, the father and what happened. And Judah says, take me. And then Joseph says, come forward, I've got something to tell you. Right? That verse 4 is the continuation of the previous chapter. Verse 3 is I'm not so sure what verse 1 and 2, which one it goes to. It could go to, I'm not exactly positive which author it goes to. But one thing is for sure, verse 4 definitely follows previous chapter. So, or unless you're the type of person that says, or it could be the fact that just that Joseph needed to, that they were so in shock that Joseph needed to bring him closer and touch them and say, no, really, it's me, it's Joseph.
Well, he had to give him some evidence that he knew something.
Actually, you want to know something funny? Hold on. Wait a minute. Let's see if I can do this. And I hope it's. I remember reading about this. I remember reading about this somewhere. I have a feeling. Yeah, here we go. All right, let's send this to the share screen just for the fun of it for everybody. So remember, this is why did he ask him to come the second time? So for those of you who can read it, this is Rashi. Step near me, I pray you. He saw that they recoiled, and he said to himself, now my brothers feel ashamed. He therefore called to them and showed them that he was circumcised. So that's why he brought him closer, to expose himself to them. He was like, oh, really? Come on closer, and ta-da!
I wouldn't have thought
That's what Ross
A biblical slasher.
He got it from Midrash Rabbah, actually. That's so funny. But right, so that's their explanation as to why he would call them twice.
That's sick.
Right? But that's proof. This is total proof. You don't believe me, I'm Joseph? Get a load. No, again, I think that's really nice of Rashi. I think what it really is multiple authors. And that's what multiple authors, and that's why he asked, is my father still alive after that whole story? It's because that verse is a verse that was included, not taking into consideration the previous conversation that it had.
But Rashi was serious about that.
Well, as serious as he can be, I suppose. That was just what.
He was drunk.
Yeah. That's right. So he said, I am your brother Joseph, he whom you sold into Egypt. Now, what's interesting is that, so this is the first reference, like the brothers might be thinking, maybe it's been 20 years.
Maybe he's over it.
Maybe he doesn't remember.
Maybe he doesn't remember. Maybe like he put it out of his mind in some sort of a PTSD kind of like a thing in which, you selective for, memory and you forgot. Maybe he doesn't. But then Joseph was like, I'm Joseph, your brother, the one who you sold into Egypt.
Well, they didn't know he was going to Egypt. They just sold him.
That's right. It would have been a whole lot better if he had added the one who you chucked into a pit, almost killed, and then sold into Egypt. But then Joseph does something which is really extraordinary. Do not be distressed or reproach yourselves because you sold me hither. It was to save life that God sent me ahead of you. It is now 2 years that there has been famine in the land, and that there are still 5 years to come in which there shall be no yield from tilling. God has sent me ahead of you to ensure your survival on earth and to save your lives in an extraordinary deliverance. So it was not you who sent me here, but God. And he has made me a father to Pharaoh, Lord of all his household and ruler over the whole land of Egypt. Wow. Right? So, this is where, it's amazing because for the most part, you could argue that the dreams were God, and the interpretations were God's interpretations and dreams and stuff like that. But for the most part, the story has kind of been absent of God. It's really not been about God. It's been about brothers and family and rising to power and being, you know, and having a family in Egypt and stuff like that. But suddenly it's now, it gets very theological, which is, you know, and it will remain stay this way a little bit longer too, in which it's like, hey, I know that you guys did some really bad things, but this is all part of God's plan. God needed me over here to deliver our people. And so have no fear. I'm not mad. I'm good.
The basis of why does bad things happen to good people?
Right. Which is, well, it depends on which person is saying those words, but you're right. That's not Kushner's view of why bad things happen to good people, but certainly in a more theologically kind of true sense, Jewishly theologically true sense, is like that whenever things happen, bad suffering happens, God's got this bigger plan for us. And that's what Joseph is communicating.
Do you think Joseph knew that all along?
No, I certainly don't think at the beginning he did. I think that he thought that he started to have that idea when he went before Pharaoh to interpret his dreams, I think. Because he says, he says, I know that you brought me here, but God does the interpreting, not me. So I think that's when there is this sense that Joseph is starting to see himself in this bigger picture.
I do think it's really interesting, though, that we know that even as a child, he had very inflated ideas about his importance.
That's true.
Or at least maybe not inflated, because that implies falsely, but he had grandiose ideas about his importance when there was no evidence for it, you know.
That's right.
And so one could say that he is inclined to find big explanations in events, even if there isn't good evidence for it.
Yep, that wouldn't surprise me. Leave it to Joseph to bring out the drama in every story and make sure that there's something grand.
Yeah.
All right, listen, I'm realizing we went way over. Thank you everyone for being here, and I will see you next week.